The scent of 1,000 white lilies was beginning to suffocate me. It clung to the air in the Meridian Crown's grand ballroom, a cloying sweetness that mixed with the faint, metallic tang of rain against the city outside. My dress, a creation of silk and lace that cost more than my first 2 cars combined, felt less like a gown and more like a beautiful, heavy cage. Trevor's hand was warm and possessive on the small of my back, a constant pressure reminding me that this was real, this gilded life. This man who looked like he'd been sculpted from marble and sunshine was now mine, or so I believed. For a girl who'd grown up with grease under her fingernails and the constant hum of a failing furnace as her lullaby, this was the pinnacle. Lena Carr, the girl who once worked 3 jobs stocking shelves overnight, cleaning office buildings before dawn, and waiting tables until her feet bled, was marrying Trevor Huxley, heir to the Huxley Dynamics fortune. I had convinced myself it was a love story. I had ignored the small, sharp moments of doubt, the way his family's smiles never quite reached their eyes, the way Trevor would gently correct my grammar or my choice of friends. I was so desperate to escape the memory of cold apartments and empty refrigerators that I'd mistaken a gilded cage for a castle. And now, Trevor's mother, Eleanor, purred into the microphone, her voice dripping with manufactured warmth. A little tribute to our dear Lena. We wanted everyone to see the incredible journey she's taken to be here with us tonight. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. Trevor squeezed my hand, whispering, "You'll love this." The massive screens that had been displaying a tasteful slideshow of our engagement photos flickered to life. But it wasn't a photo of us in Paris. It was grainy, handheld footage of me, years younger, hair scraped back in a messy ponytail, mopping a grimy floor in a deserted office lobby. My face was tired, etched with a weariness that felt 1,000,000 miles away from the carefully applied makeup I wore now. The video jump cut to another scene me, in a cheap diner uniform, balancing a heavy tray of food, a customer's angry face blurred in the foreground. Then another, me in a warehouse, wearing a bulky work jacket, my breath pluming in the cold air as I scanned boxes. The footage was expertly, cruelly edited. They had found every unflattering angle, every moment of exhaustion. The subtle background music, a somber piano melody, turned my hard work into a tragedy, my survival into something pitiful and sordid. A low murmur rippled through the guests. It started as confusion, then morphed into something ugly. A snicker from a table near the front, a whispered comment that drifted over the crystal glasses. My own bridesmaids shifted uncomfortably. My maid of honor, Chloe, my friend since we were kids navigating the same broken sidewalks, took a step forward. "What is this? Stop it." But a Huxley family cousin simply put a hand on her arm, his grip firm, his smile a mask of politeness as he steered her back into line. Eleanor's voice returned, a venomous caress over the speakers. "You see, my son has such a big heart. He can look past humble beginnings, so very, very humble." The laughter was louder now, a wave of derision washing over me. The band had stopped playing. The only sound was the humiliating soundtrack of my past and the cruel amusement of the present. I saw the small red light of the internal livestream camera, broadcasting my shame to every screen in the hotel complex. My face burned, my heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird. I looked at Trevor, my eyes pleading. He just stood there, a pained, practiced expression on his face, as if this were a difficult but necessary trial, a test of my character. My world shrank to the size of that ballroom, a stage where I was the main exhibit in a freak show. My past wasn't a journey, it was a crime scene, and I was the primary suspect. Then, a chair scraped against the polished floor. From a VIP table in the corner, a man stood up. I'd noticed him earlier, only because he seemed so out of place. He wasn't celebrating, he was observing. Dressed in a suit so dark it seemed to absorb the light, he moved with a stillness that was more commanding than any loud gesture. He wasn't a guest of the family, he was a guest of the hotel's owner, a name whispered with the kind of reverence usually reserved for gods or monsters, Dante Viscari. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like shattered glass. "Turn it off." All eyes swiveled to him. Eleanor Huxley's face tightened. "Excuse me, this is a private family moment." "This isn't a moment, it's an ambush," Dante Viscari said, his gaze fixed on the screen. "Turn it off now." Two hotel security guards, employees of the Meridian Hospitality Group, started moving toward him, their expressions uncertain. They were used to dealing with drunk wedding guests, not this cold, contained authority. Trevor's father motioned for them to hurry. Viscari didn't even look at them. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small leather wallet, and flipped it open to reveal a gold badge. He let the guards get a single, clear look at it. Federal Commerce Integrity Office, a name that sounded important and vaguely threatening. Then, with a motion of utter contempt, he tossed the wallet onto the table. It landed with a soft thud. "A cheap fake," he said, his voice laced with ice. "The kind of thing they use to scare people like you. Here, the only rule is respect for the bride. Shut it down." The guards froze. His dismissal of his own supposed authority was more powerful than the badge itself. Before anyone could react, the screens flickered again. The humiliating montage of my life vanished. In its place was a new video. It was a covert recording from an office, Trevor's office. I saw him talking to a video editor, his voice crisp and clear. "Cut it, right when she wipes the sweat from her forehead. I want her to look desperate. This has to be airtight. When she sees this, she'll sign anything. The revised prenup, the asset waiver, all of it. We can't have any loose ends before the IPO." A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. The truth, raw and undeniable, was playing out for everyone to see. Trevor hadn't been testing me. He'd been breaking me. He was orchestrating my public execution to secure a financial document. Trevor's face went from pale to crimson. "Security, get him out of here. That's deep fake. It's slander." He snapped his fingers, and his personal security, 4 bulky men in ill-fitting suits, began to converge on Dante. Dante didn't move. He simply pointed a finger, not at Trevor, but at the hotel's general manager, who was hovering nervously by the door. "Anyone takes another step," Dante said, his voice dropping to a deadly quiet, "and the majority shares of the Meridian Hospitality Group will have a new owner by morning." It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. The general manager went white and subtly shook his head at his own security. Trevor's men stopped in their tracks. I stood there, swaying, the world a dizzying kaleidoscope of shock, betrayal, and a white-hot fury that was finally beginning to burn through the shame. And then a hand appeared in front of me, strong, steady, with neatly trimmed nails and the faint scar across one knuckle. It was Dante Viscari's. He was beside me now, his presence a shield. His dark eyes met mine, and for the first time all night I felt seen, not judged. "When they make you the target," he said, his voice low, "for my ears only. You need someone who knows how to turn off the lights." I didn't hesitate. I placed my trembling hand in his. His grip was firm and reassuring. He turned, and with me in tow, he walked away from the altar, away from the gasping crowd, away from the ruins of my life. We moved into a service corridor, the opulent gold and cream of the ballroom giving way to harsh fluorescent lights and institutional yellow walls. The muffled sounds of shouting faded behind us, replaced by the echo of our footsteps and the frantic, pursuing click of heels. Dante shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it over my bare shoulders. It was warm from his body and smelled of expensive wool, clean rain, and something else, something dangerous and masculine, like ozone before a storm. He led me to a service elevator, his hand never leaving mine. The lights overhead flickered, casting long, dancing shadows as the metal doors slid shut, sealing us in the small, sterile box. He finally spoke again, his voice a low rumble. "You have no idea what you've just walked into." The elevator descended, a gut-wrenching drop that mirrored the collapse of my world. The doors opened not to a lobby, but to the damp, cool air of the underground parking garage. The path to a waiting car was blocked. Two men in dark uniforms and tactical vests stood there, hands resting near their hips. The letters BSCD Bay Bridge Special Crimes Directorate were emblazoned on their chests. My blood ran cold. They were here for him. I had just traded one prison for another. But Dante didn't stop. He gave them a slow, dismissive smile. "Those 3D printed badges look cheap," he murmured, almost to himself. He raised the small key fob in his other hand and pressed a button. Behind the fake officers, a beast awoke, the engine of a classic coupe, low-slung and predatory in the dim light, roared to life with a sound that vibrated through the concrete floor. A Viscari 250 GT, its headlights cut through the gloom, pinning the two men in their glare. They flinched, taking an involuntary step back. That was all the opening Dante needed. He pulled me along, moving with a fluid grace that was terrifying. We slid into the car's leather seats, the door slamming shut with a solid, definitive thud. He twisted the key, the engine screamed, and with a squeal of tires, he threw the car into a gut-wrenching reverse J-turn. He navigated the concrete pillars with inches to spare, a blur of controlled violence. As we rocketed toward the exit ramp, the hem of my beautiful, ruined wedding dress, caught in the door, trailed on the grimy asphalt, leaving a fleeting white streak on the dark, rain-slicked ground. I risked a glance back. Framed in the garage entrance was Trevor, his perfect face contorted in a mask of primal fury, his voice a raw, desperate roar that I could feel more than hear. "You're mine." Beside me, Dante Viscari drove, his eyes fixed on the rain-swept street ahead, his expression unreadable. "She belongs to herself," he said. So quietly I almost thought I'd imagined it. The sleek coupe devoured the wet, empty streets of Bay Bridge, its engine a low growl that was the only sound in our shared silence. The neon signs of downtown blurred into streaks of angry color, their reflections slick on the rain-drenched asphalt. My wedding dress, heavy with dampness and disgrace, felt like a shroud. I was still trembling, a fine, uncontrollable shudder that started deep in my bones. It wasn't just the cold. It was the aftershock of my life detonating in front of a crowd of smiling assassins. Dante drove with an unnerving economy of motion, his hands steady on the wheel, his gaze sweeping the road, the mirrors, the darkened alleyways we passed. He was a man entirely present in the moment, a stark contrast to my own fractured consciousness. We left the glittering towers of the city behind, plunging into the industrial heart of the ironworks district. Here, the buildings were brick and steel skeletons, ghosts of a more industrious age, their windows dark and hollow. He turned into a narrow, unmarked alley and pulled up to a massive, corrugated steel door. It rolled upwards with a low groan, revealing a cavernous space. He drove inside, and the door rumbled shut behind us, sealing off the city and the storm. We were in what looked like a converted warehouse. Exposed brick walls soared 3 stories high to a ceiling of steel beams and skylights, which were now dark, weeping sheets of rain. The space was cavernous, but a section had been turned into a living area, a collection of minimalist furniture, a sleek kitchen island, and a spiral staircase leading to a loft above. It was masculine, functional, and felt as secure as a fortress. Dante killed the engine. The sudden silence was absolute. He didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there, letting the quiet settle around us. Finally, he turned to me. In the dim glow of the dashboard lights, his face was all sharp angles and shadows. "We're safe here," he said. It was a simple statement, but it held the weight of an ironclad guarantee. He got out, and I fumbled with the door handle, my fingers clumsy and numb. The heavy silk of the dress tangled around my legs as I stepped onto the cold concrete floor. The shivering intensified. Dante was there, but he kept a careful, respectful distance. He pointed to a door. "There's a bathroom through there. You'll find clothes, a towel, whatever you need." I nodded, unable to form words. The first step was the hardest. It felt like I was moving through water. Inside. The bathroom was as Spartan and clean as the rest of the space. I found a stack of soft, gray towels and simple black sweatpants and a t-shirt folded neatly on a bench. Peeling off the wedding dress was like shedding a skin. I left it in a heap on the floor, a crumpled white ghost of my shattered dreams. The hot water of the shower was a painful blessing, stinging my cold skin back to life. I stood under the spray until the water started to run cool, watching the last of my bridal makeup swirl down the drain. When I emerged, wrapped in a thick towel, Dante had placed a steaming mug on a low wooden table. He was standing by the vast windows, looking out at the rain-streaked darkness, his back to me. "Ginger tea," he said, without turning around. "It'll help with the shock." I put on the clothes. They were too big, but they were soft and warm and anonymous. I picked up the mug, the ceramic warming my frozen hands. He still hadn't looked at me, giving me the space to pull myself together. It was a gesture of profound respect, more comforting than any empty platitude could ever be. The shivering finally began to subside, replaced by a slow, simmering anger. The humiliation was hardening into something else, something solid and sharp, self-respect. "Why," my voice was a croak, "why did you help me?" He turned from the window. "Because I don't like watching rigged games." He moved to an armchair opposite the sofa where I sat, sinking into it with that same contained stillness. "And what the Huxleys were doing to you was the opening move in a very large, very rigged game." I clutched the mug tighter. "The prenup," Trevor said. It was never just about the prenup," Dante interrupted, his voice calm and level. "That was the leverage. Huxley Dynamics is preparing for a massive IPO. The valuation they're aiming for is aspirational. It's built on a foundation of illegally acquired and sold user data, an algorithmic miracle. They're calling it's a house of cards, and Trevor knew it, a contentious divorce, or a wife who knew too much and wasn't legally bound to silence, could have exposed the entire fraud before they cashed out. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The rush to the altar, the ironclad clauses in the agreement I'd been pressured to sign, the public character assassination. It wasn't about love or betrayal. It was a corporate strategy. I was a liability to be neutralized. "So you just happened to be there?" I asked, a sliver of my old skepticism cutting through the fog. A concerned citizen at a stranger's wedding. A faint, humorless smile touched his lips. "My presence is rarely a coincidence. Lena, I've been tracking the flow of money from certain interested parties into a Huxley-run charitable foundation, the Sunrise Pledge. It's a classic washing machine. Dirty money goes in, gets rinsed through philanthropic grants, and comes out clean enough to prop up their fraudulent IPO. Your wedding wasn't just on my radar, it was a key event." A flush of shame crept up my neck. I thought back to the day Trevor's lawyer had presented me with the prenuptial agreement. I had seen the predatory language, the clauses that stripped me of not just future assets, but of any right to speak about the family or their business. I had questioned it. Trevor had held my face in his hands, his eyes so sincere, and told me it was just a formality. "Everyone in our world does this, Lena," he'd said. "It's to protect the family. It doesn't mean anything about us." I had let him convince me because I wanted to believe him. I wanted the fairy tale so badly I was willing to ignore the fine print. "I saw it," I admitted, my voice low. "I knew the contract was wrong, but I signed it anyway." "They banked on that," Dante said, his expression unreadable. "They preyed on your hope." The words stung, but they were true. My practical nature, the part of me that knew how to fix a faulty circuit or diagnose a rattling engine, was reasserting itself. Hope was a luxury. Facts were a foundation. "You say all of this about the data, the foundation. Where's your proof?" He didn't seem surprised by the question. In fact, he looked pleased. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, metallic object, no bigger than my thumb, a USB drive, and he slid it across the coffee table. It stopped inches from my mug. Encrypted accounting ledgers from the Sunrise Pledge's offshore servers, he said. Decoded this morning. It details every dollar in, every dollar out, and a direct link to the shell corporations funding the data acquisition. Just as I reached for it, footsteps echoed on the spiral staircase. 2 people descended into the main living area, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and a calm, composed demeanor, and a younger man with restless energy and the kind of quick, clever smile that suggested he could talk his way into or out of anything. Lena, this is Isla Moreau and Cade Rizzo, Dante said. My associates. Isla nodded at me, her expression professional. It's a pleasure, though I wish the circumstances were better. Cade gave a small, apologetic shrug. Yeah, crashing a wedding is a new one for us. Usually, we're a little more subtle. Isla handles strategy and legal. Cade gets us through digital doors, Dante explained simply. Isla's focus was sharp, her gaze direct. Dante has filled us in. You need to understand, Miss Carr, the Huxleys are not the only players in this. There's a rival syndicate, the Ragusa Covenant. They've been trying to get their own hooks into Huxley dynamics. They don't want to expose the fraud. They want a piece of it. Trevor's stunt tonight wasn't just about controlling you. It was a message to the Ragusas, showing them he had his house in order. My head was spinning. This was bigger than a cruel joke, bigger than a financial trap. I had stumbled into a war. What you are now, Dante said, his voice drawing my focus back to him, is a legal pivot point. If the Huxleys can successfully and publicly discredit you, they can frame any future accusation you make as the ramblings of a scorned, unstable gold digger. Your destroyed reputation becomes the legal foundation for their lies. They can wash their hands, take the company public, and everyone gets paid. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I could run. Dante could probably get me out of the city, out of the country. I could disappear, change my name, and spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. The thought was tempting. The thought of safety, of anonymity. But then I pictured Eleanor Huxley's smug face. I heard the laughter of the guests. I felt the phantom weight of Trevor's hand on my back, guiding me to my own slaughter. The anger returned, cold and clear. They had taken my past and twisted it into a weapon against me. They would not take my future. No, I said, the word coming out stronger than I expected. I'm not running. They did this to me in my home, in Baybridge. I'm not letting them have the last word. Dante watched me, his dark eyes searching my face. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something beyond strategy, something that might have been approval. Good, he said, but if we do this, we do it my way. I will protect you. But in return, I need every piece of the truth you have, every conversation, every document you saw, every doubt you ever had about Trevor and his family. Absolute honesty. Our eyes met across the table. It was a contract, sealed not with ink but with a shared intensity. This wasn't a man offering a rescue. He was offering a partnership, a dangerous, terrifying partnership. It was a promise of allegiance, not of fealty. And in that moment, I trusted him. As if on cue, a phone buzzed on the kitchen island. My phone. I'd forgotten I even had it. Cade retrieved it, his expression grim as he read the screen. Well, they're not wasting any time, he said, holding it out. The Baybridge Chronicle just posted an article. Gold-digging bride abandons tech heir at the altar. Flees with reputed mob boss Dante Viscari. My name, my picture. Lies, all of it, spun into a narrative that made me the villain. My first instinct was to grab the phone, to type a furious rebuttal, to scream my truth into the digital void. Dante held up a hand, stopping me. Don't. They're destroying me, I shot back, my voice rising. They're trying to, he corrected, his tone implacable. You never respond when they control the broadcast. It's their game, their rules. You'll just be another hysterical voice in their narrative. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes holding mine. We don't respond. We seize the broadcast. A plan was forming behind his eyes, a cold, calculated strategy. The Huxleys will want to control this, he continued. They'll call a press conference tomorrow morning to solidify their story, to paint you as a villain and Trevor as the victim. Isla nodded in agreement. They'll have their lawyers, their PR team, everything perfectly choreographed. Dante's faint smile returned. It was the smile of a predator. Then that's where we'll hit them, he said. Tomorrow morning, we're going to interrupt their performance with a cold-blooded legal and media strike they'll never see coming. Sleep didn't come. How could it? My mind was a chaotic replay of the last few hours, a horror film projected onto the back of my eyelids. I lay on a bed in the loft of Dante's fortress, the clean, masculine scent of the sheets doing little to soothe me. The rain had softened to a persistent drizzle, a million tiny fingers drumming against the skylights. The sound reminded me of the gentle tap-tap-tap of a wrench tightening a bolt, a rhythm from another life, a life that was truly mine. My thoughts drifted away from the wreckage of the ballroom, back to a time when my biggest worry was a frayed elevator cable or a faulty motor, before Trevor, before the silk and the lies. I remembered the weight of my tool belt, a familiar comfort around my hips, the scent of hydraulic fluid and ozone, a perfume I preferred to the Chanel No. 5 Trevor had insisted I wear. I remembered the view from the top of the Bay Bridge Financial Tower, looking down at the city lights twinkling like a fallen constellation, a sight reserved for me and the birds during a late-night maintenance call. My hands, then, were often smudged with grease, but they were capable. They could diagnose a problem by sound. They could splice wires in near darkness. They could bring a dead machine back to life. I was a technician. I fixed things. That's how I met Trevor, when he was trapped in the VIP elevator of that same financial tower, the one reserved for the penthouse suites. The call came in as a high-priority entrapment. I found him leaning against the polished wood paneling, not panicked, but annoyed, as if the universe had personally inconvenienced him. I pried open the doors, reset the braking system, and had him on his way in under 10 minutes. He looked at me, really looked at me, taking in my work-stained jumpsuit and the smudge of dirt on my cheek. I've never seen a woman do this job, he'd said, a note of genuine surprise in his voice. He asked me for coffee as a thank you. That coffee turned into dinner. The dinner turned into a whirlwind romance that felt like a movie. He was charming, attentive, and he saw me in a way I'd never seen myself, not as a grease monkey, but as someone beautiful and worthy of penthouses and champagne. He loved my stories about the city's underbelly, the secret mechanical worlds hidden behind walls. For a while, it felt real, but the fairy tale came with conditions. Tiny threads of control disguised as concern. You shouldn't be working such long hours. Lena, it's not safe. Let me take care of you. It started with my job. He convinced me to quit, framing it as a gift, an elevation. And then it was my friends. Chloe's a little rough around the edges, isn't she? Maybe it's better if we just stick to my circle for a while. He bought me a new phone with a new number. A clean start. Just for us, he'd said, to protect you from your past. I kept a journal back then, flipping through its imaginary pages in my mind. I could see my own handwriting documenting my slow erasure. October 12th. Trevor says my old apartment is depressing. We're moving into his condo. It's beautiful, but it doesn't feel like mine. It feels like I'm visiting. November 3rd. Every step away from myself feels like a broken rung on a ladder. My mother, a woman who had seen the sharp edges of the world more clearly than I ever could, had tried to warn me. We were sitting in her small, meticulously clean kitchen, the air smelling of lemon polish and her favorite tea. I'd been showing her the diamond bracelet Trevor had given me. She'd taken my hand, her fingers calloused from a lifetime of hard work, and looked not at the bracelet, but at my eyes. "Be careful, Lena girl," she'd whispered. "Sometimes a golden ring is just a prettier name for a collar." I had dismissed it as cynicism, the bitterness of a woman who'd never been given a fairy tale of her own. I was a fool. The Huxley family dinners were polite, elegant interrogations. They'd ask about my background with a detached curiosity. Like scientists studying an interesting specimen, they quantified me, measured my suitability against some invisible chart of pedigree and polish. I was always found wanting. I didn't know the right wines. I hadn't summered in the right places. I hadn't learned the art of saying nothing with 1,000 words. Trevor would squeeze my leg under the table, a silent command to smile, to be the charming, grateful girl he was so magnanimously lifting from obscurity. It was during that time, just before I quit my job, that I had the call at the Viscari building downtown. A child was trapped in an elevator, his small hand caught in the inner door. I remembered the mother's frantic sobs, the way her terror filled the marble lobby. I bypassed the main controls, rappelled down the shaft from the floor above, and spoke to the boy through the gap, my voice low and calm. I told him about gears and pulleys, turning the terrifying machine into a giant mechanical puzzle we had to solve together, using my tools. I manually released the pressure on the door mechanism, freeing him without a single scratch. I never saw who was watching the security monitors that day. I never knew that in a quiet office. Dante Viscari had witnessed the entire thing, his attention captured not by the drama, but by the quiet competence, the calm in the face of chaos. A seed of respect had been planted long before he ever stood up at my wedding. I thought of the day one of my old colleagues, a single dad named Marcus, was laid off. I saw him in the parking lot, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I didn't have much, but I drove to the bank, withdrew half of my savings, and slipped the envelope into his locker anonymously. A week later, at a glittering charity gala, I watched Trevor pledge $100,000 to the Sunrise Pledge, posing for cameras as the announcer praised his incredible generosity. The contrast was a physical blow. All the signs were there, scattered like shards of glass on the path behind me. The last one was a photograph. We were doing a test shoot for the wedding. In the picture, I'm wearing the magnificent dress, a vision in white, but my smile is tilted, slightly off-center. It doesn't reach my eyes. It's the smile of a woman trying to convince herself she is happy. Seeing it was like looking at a stranger. Where was the girl with grease on her cheek and stars in her eyes on the rooftop? In my memory, I went to the small box of keepsakes I stored in my mother's attic. Inside, nestled in velvet, was my father's favorite wrench, a small, perfectly balanced crescent wrench, worn smooth with use. He was a mechanic, a man who believed you could fix anything if you just had the right tool and the patience to understand how it worked. He'd given it to me when I got my technician's license. "Never let anyone tell you you can't dismantle a broken machine," he'd said. That was the moment the decision had crystallized in my mind. Even before the public humiliation, this marriage was a broken machine, and I was going to take it apart. The memory was so vivid it pulled me from the bed. I padded quietly down the spiral staircase. The main area was dimly lit, with Cade asleep on a sofa, his laptop still glowing on his chest. Isla was at the kitchen island, nursing a cup of coffee, her face illuminated by the screen of a tablet. And Dante was there, in his armchair, not sleeping but watching the rain, as if he were standing guard. My ruined wedding dress was hanging from a hook near the door, a pathetic, mud-stained monument to my stupidity. I walked over to it, the cold concrete floor chilling my bare feet. My old work bag was on the floor where I'd left it. I knelt, unzipped the main compartment, and my fingers closed around the familiar, cool steel of my father's wrench. It felt like coming home. I took the small wrench and slipped it deep into a hidden pocket inside the bodice of the wedding dress. A symbol, an anchor, my will, forged in steel. A small tool for a big job. Dante's voice was quiet, startling me. He hadn't turned, but he had seen me, his eyes catching my reflection in the dark glass of the window. He didn't ask what I was doing. He didn't question the gesture. He simply acknowledged it, respecting the weight of small things. I walked over to the island where Isla was working. On her screen was a complex flow chart. She tapped a box at the top. Huxley Dynamics, she said. A line connected it to another box. Sunrise Pledge. This is the washing machine. Trevor's mother is the director. She traced the line further. From there, the money is funneled as grants to a series of shell corporations. We've identified the main one, Lucent Harbor LLC. Another line snaked from that box to the last one, this one glowing red on the screen. And from Lucent Harbor, payments are made directly into the accounts of the Ragusa Covenant. It was all there, a map of their corruption, laid bare in the quiet of the loft. The sight of it didn't scare me anymore. It focused me. All my life, I'd been handed broken things and told to make them work. Leaky pipes, busted engines, failing elevators. This was just a bigger, more complicated machine, but the principle was the same. Dante rose from his chair and came to stand beside me, his shoulder almost brushing mine. We all looked at the glowing red line that represented the end of the chain, the dark heart of the enterprise. "They expect you to run," he said, his voice a low rumble, "to hide, to be the broken bride from the headlines." I looked from the diagram to my dress, where the weight of the small wrench was a secret promise. I felt the last of the fear burn away, leaving behind the cold, hard certainty of a job that needed to be done. "I'm not running," I said, my voice steady. "We're going to fix this." The next morning, the loft was a command center. The air, which had been thick with unspoken tension, now crackled with the electric hum of a plane in motion. Cade had turned the massive wall opposite the windows into a multi-screen display, and at 10 sharp, the main feed switched to a live broadcast from a conference room at the Midtown Bay Bridge Hotel. The Huxley family crest, an obnoxious gold lion clutching a lightning bolt, was emblazoned on the podium. There they were, Trevor looking pale and somber, every inch the wronged husband. His mother, Eleanor, sat beside him, a mask of stoic grief that I knew concealed a viper's satisfaction. Their lawyer, a man with a face like a clenched fist, stepped up to the microphone. I sat on the sofa, a mug of coffee untouched in my hands, my own heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. Isla stood beside me, tablet in hand, while Dante watched from his armchair, perfectly still, a general observing the opening salvos of a battle he had already mapped out. "My client, Trevor Huxley, and the entire Huxley family are victims of a cruel and calculated deception," the lawyer began, his voice oozing insincere sympathy. The words were a physical assault, each one a carefully crafted lie designed to bury me. Miss Lena Carr, a woman we welcomed into our family, has engaged in a shocking act of extortion. When her outrageous financial demands were not met on the eve of her wedding, she fled, not only abandoning her distraught fiancé at the altar, but doing so in the company of a known associate of the Vescari organized crime family. My knuckles were white on the coffee mug. He made me sound like a monster, a cheap villain in their perfectly produced drama. The cameras flashed. The reporters scribbled furiously. They were swallowing it whole. "Showtime," Cade murmured from his station. On the screen, as the lawyer continued his tirade, a thin, scrolling line of text appeared at the bottom of the broadcast, like a news ticker. In bold, white letters, it read, "These statements are false. Accounting evidence is currently being filed with the Bay Bridge Civil Court, Chamber 12. Letter speak." A ripple of confusion went through the press corps in the video feed. A few reporters squinted at the screen, then at their phones. The Huxley lawyer faltered for a second, his rhythm broken, before plowing ahead. "Isla," Dante said, his voice calm. Isla tapped her tablet. "Filed." She confirmed, "Petition for a temporary restraining order against defamation, citing the Garden State's Digital Dignity Act. The court clerk has time-stamped it. It's official." This was the first punch, a precise, legal jab they wouldn't see coming until it had already landed. But it wasn't the knockout blow. That was my job. It was time. I stood up and walked toward the bedroom, my movements stiff. My wedding dress was still hanging there, a symbol of my humiliation. I ignored it. On the bed. Isla had laid out the clothes I'd asked for, a simple dark blue work jumpsuit. The fabric was tough, familiar. Putting it on felt like putting on armor. It was the uniform of the woman I was, not the doll they had tried to make me. I zipped it up, the sound loud in the quiet room. I was no longer a bride in a white dress. I was a technician with a job to do. When I walked back out, Cade gave me a low whistle of approval. Dante's eyes met mine, and he gave a single, sharp nod. It was all the encouragement I needed. Isla was already on her way out. "I'll be on site," she said. "Phase 2 is yours. Lena." The press conference was less than 5 blocks away. I walked there, my heart pounding a steady, determined rhythm against my ribs. I could feel the city around me, its energy, its grit. It was my city, and I wouldn't be run out of it. As I approached the hotel, I saw Isla standing near the entrance, speaking calmly to a pair of uniformed BSCD officers. But these weren't the fakes from the garage. These were the real thing, their expressions bored and professional. Dante had made a call. He hadn't commanded them. He had simply provided a tip to the right department about a potential financial disturbance. He was using the system against itself. I walked past the scrum of news vans and pushed through the hotel doors. The press conference was in a smaller ballroom, and I entered from the back just as Trevor himself was taking the podium to give his tearful, rehearsed speech about his broken heart. All eyes were on him. No one saw me until I was halfway down the aisle. A reporter in the front row spotted me first. His eyes widened. A camera swiveled in my direction, then another. A wave of murmurs and flashes swept the room, growing into a roar. Trevor stopped mid-sentence, his jaw dropping as he saw me, dressed not in a designer suit, but in the clothes of a working woman. I didn't go to the podium. I stopped in the center of the room, forcing them to turn their attention to me. I held up a hand, not for silence, but to show it was my turn. "You've heard their story," I said, my voice clear and steady, amplified by the dozens of microphones now pointed at my face. "Now you're going to hear the facts. My name is Lena Carr. For 7 years, I was an elevator and systems maintenance technician. My hands are more familiar with grease and wiring diagrams than they are with champagne glasses. My hands know the difference between building something and breaking someone." I looked directly at Trevor. His face was a mask of disbelief and fury. "Mr. Huxley tried to break me. He and his family orchestrated a public humiliation based on a lie in order to force me into a predatory financial agreement. They are not victims. They are predators. The evidence of their financial misconduct, which is linked to their charitable foundation, the Sunrise Pledge, has been submitted to the court. You don't have to take my word for it. You just have to follow the facts. And a fact is a stubborn thing. It doesn't care about wealth or power. It just is." I had said my piece. 90 seconds, no tears, no hysterics, just the cold, hard truth. The room erupted into a cacophony of shouted questions. "Trevor, is this true?" "Miss Carr, what is the nature of the financial misconduct?" Trevor grabbed the microphone, his composure shattered. "She's lying. She's being manipulated by the Viscari family. He was cut off. The 2 BSCD officers Isla had been speaking to were now walking into the room, their expressions all business. They weren't here for me. They walked right past me and up to the podium. "Mr. Huxley." "Ma'am," one of them said to Eleanor, "we're with the Bureau of Special Corporate Donations. We've received a judicial request to review the donation receipts for the Sunrise Pledge. We need to see them now." Eleanor's face went rigid. "This is harassment. Your lawyers are welcome to meet us at our office," the officer said flatly. "But we will be seeing those receipts." A reporter shouted from the back, "Is it true one of your largest anonymous donors is a fund connected to the Ragusa Covenant?" The question was a precision strike. Cade must have leaked it to a friendly journalist. The color drained from Eleanor's face. The mention of their rival syndicate, in front of the press and the police, was a disaster. She'd been stabbed in the back with her own dirty secrets. Back in the loft, Dante was making a call. I was watching it unfold on a small screen Kate had set up for him. Dante was calling the fake FCIO director, the man Trevor had hired to intimidate people. The man's blustering voice was audible over the speaker. "You have no idea who you're messing with. Vescari." "On the contrary," Dante replied, his voice dangerously smooth. "I have a recording of you and your associate demanding a $50,000 reputation management fee from one of my business partners last month. I believe that's called extortion. The real FCIO might be very interested in that conversation. Or you could simply disappear. Your choice." There was a click, and the line went dead. Another fire had been extinguished with a single, quiet threat. The tide was turning, and it was turning fast on social media. The hashtag #StandWithLena was starting to trend, eclipsing the Huxleys' carefully managed narrative. My brief, factual statement, delivered in my work jumpsuit, had resonated more than all their expensive PR. I hadn't played the victim. I had defined myself. By late afternoon, the fallout was hitting the underworld. Cade, monitoring encrypted financial networks, let out a low whistle. "Huxley Dynamics pre-IPO shares are taking a nosedive on the dark markets," he announced. "Looks like the Ragusas aren't happy their investment is suddenly under a microscope. They're getting nervous." The beast was wounded, and its partners were starting to circle. That's when Dante made his final move of the day. He instructed Cade to send a single, encrypted message to Trevor's personal phone. It wasn't a threat or a demand. It was a digital invitation, elegant and simple. It was for the annual Sunrise Pledge Charity Auction Gala, tonight at the Aurora Museum of Glass. "He has to go," Isla said, looking up from her tablet. "If he's a no-show now, his investors and partners will panic. He has to project strength and control." "He'll walk right into it," Cade said with a grin. I looked at Dante, and he was watching the news reports, which were now showing my speech on a loop, contrasting it with the Huxleys' flustered denials. He knew Trevor was cornered. He knew the Ragusas would be there to protect their investment. He had engineered a situation where all his enemies would be gathered in one glittering, vulnerable location. He caught my eye and gave that same cold, confident smile. "Let them all gather in one room," he said, his voice a low promise of the chaos to come. "It's always best to have a full audience before you pull back the curtain." And the Aurora Museum of Glass was a cathedral of light and fragility. Perched on the edge of the glass harbor, its crystalline walls seemed to dissolve into the rainy twilight, the entire structure glittering like a diamond dropped in water. Inside, the city's elite drifted through galleries of exquisite sculptures, their jewels competing with the art. They were sharks swimming in a tank of their own design. And tonight, Dante and I were swimming with them. We were the anonymous benefactors of the newly created Car Viscari Foundation, a fiction so audacious it was believable. I wore a simple, elegant black dress Isla had procured, a universe away from the jumpsuit, but just as much a uniform. My father's wrench was a cold, hard secret in a hidden pocket. Dante, in a perfectly tailored dark suit, moved through the crowd with an easy authority that made him seem more a predator than a guest. A tiny, flesh-toned comms unit was tucked into my ear, Cade's voice a low, reassuring murmur. "Isla is in position by the main gallery," Cade's voice buzzed. "Stage right of the auction platform. She looks like she owns the place." I scanned the room and saw her, dressed as a museum-certified appraiser, complete with a clipboard and a stern, intellectual air. She was examining the auction pieces with professional disinterest. One of them, a magnificent glass swordfish, shimmered under a spotlight on a black pedestal. It was beautiful, dynamic, and according to Dante's intelligence, hollow, inside, sealed in a waterproof cylinder, was the handwritten ledger detailing the Sunrise Pledge's real transactions, the cash, the kickbacks, the bribes, the key. The auction was about to begin when Trevor arrived. He was late, a calculated move to appear unfazed by the day's events. But his face was tight, his eyes darting nervously around the room. And he wasn't alone. The man beside him was around our age, with dark, watchful eyes and a suit that couldn't conceal the coiled tension in his shoulders. He moved with the deadly grace of a panther. "And there's our party crasher," Cade said in my ear. "Matteo Ragusa, nephew of the big boss. He's not here to bid on art." Matteo was Ragusa's insurance policy. He was here to retrieve the ledger before the Huxley empire imploded and took their money with it. The game had just become infinitely more dangerous. The auctioneer began the proceedings. A hideous vase went for an obscene amount of money. Then, a delicate chandelier. As the swordfish was announced as the next item, the main lights in the gallery flickered once, twice, then dimmed for a dramatic 3 seconds before returning to full power. Cade's signal. Under the cover of the guests' surprised murmurs, Dante leaned close, his breath warm against my ear, his hand a feather-light touch on the small of my back. "The service access panel is behind the velvet rope to your left, 3 steps past the pedestal. You'll be invisible from the main floor. The magnetic lock on the case has a 12-second reset delay once you cut the power. You have to be inside the crawl space when the lights go back on." My heart hammered against my ribs. 12 seconds! I gave him the barest of nods and detached myself from his side, moving with a purposeful nonchalance toward the display. The guests were focused on the auctioneer. No one noticed me slip behind the velvet rope into the small, shadowed alcove that housed the exhibit. The panel was exactly where Dante said it would be. It looked like part of the wall, but I could see the faint seams. My fingers, trained for this kind of work, found the hidden release. The panel swung inward, revealing a dark, tight space smelling of dust and wiring. I took a deep breath and slid inside, pulling the panel almost shut behind me. I was in the guts of the museum. I could hear the auctioneer's voice, muffled, on the other side of the wall. "Do I hear 200,000? Through the comm, Cade's voice was a tense whisper. "Okay, Lena, I'm rerouting the power now. The lights will flicker again in 5, 4. I brace myself, a multi-tool from my pocket already in hand. 3, 2, 1. The lights outside my hiding place went out. The emergency lighting, a dim orange glow, kicked in the main hall. I could hear Dante's voice, calm and cutting, carrying through the sudden quiet. He was intercepting Matteo Ragusa. "An interesting choice of acquisitions tonight. Matteo," Dante was saying, "are you here for the art or the evidence?" I didn't have time to listen. I scrambled through the crawl space, my small flashlight beam cutting through the dark. I found the junction box for the display case, a mess of wires, red for power, a simple magnetic lock. I clipped the main wire. A soft click echoed in the tiny space. The lock was disarmed. "Outside," I heard Matteo's sharp reply. "You have no idea what you're involved in. Vascari." "On the contrary," Dante's voice was like ice. "I know that you're about to lose a very significant investment." Isla moved like a shadow. In the dim emergency light, I saw her through a small grate. She lifted the glass swordfish from its pedestal as if she were simply moving it for inspection. She turned, stepped into the alcove, and passed the heavy, cold sculpture through the access panel to me. Her hand was steady, her eyes urgent. "Go," she whispered. I took the sculpture, its weight surprising. My fingers brushed against hers, a silent exchange of trust. Just as I secured my grip, we both heard it, the sound of heavy, approaching footsteps from a service corridor behind me. "We've got company," I breathed into my comm. "I see them." Cade's voice was tight, initiating phase 3, now. Suddenly, a piercing shriek filled the air, the fire alarm. Red lights began to flash, strobing through the grate, turning the scene into a nightmare. In the main hall, panic erupted. The high-pitched wail was our smokescreen. The stampede of terrified millionaires was our cover. I scrambled back through the service tunnels, clutching the glass fish, following the path Cade had mapped out for me in my ear. Behind me, I heard a scuffle. "He's figured it out," Cade yelled. "Dante, he's coming for you." I risked a look back through another grate. I saw Matteo Ragusa, his face a mask of fury, breaking away from the panicked crowd. He had a weapon in his hand, a dark shape with a suppressor on the end. He raised it, aiming not at the ceiling, but at Dante. My heart stopped, but Dante was already moving. In a blur of motion, he ripped one of the heavy metal cufflinks from his shirt. As Matteo leveled his weapon, Dante flicked his wrist. The cufflink shot through the air, a silver streak in the flashing red light. It struck Matteo's hand with a sharp crack. It wasn't a bullet, but it was enough. The weapon clattered to the floor, and Matteo cried out, his hand instinctively going to his injured fingers. Dante was on him in a second. A sharp, disabling blow to the shoulder, sending Matteo staggering back into the fleeing crowd. "Now," Lena Dante's voice commanded through the comm. I didn't wait. I found the service elevator at the end of the corridor, jamming the doors with my multi-tool to keep them open. Dante and Hila appeared out of the chaos a moment later, their faces grim. We piled inside, and the doors slid shut, the sound of the alarm fading as we descended. As the elevator dropped, I worked on the sculpture, finding the seam along its belly. I twisted, and it came apart in my hands. Inside was the waterproof cylinder. I pulled it out, my fingers trembling with adrenaline. I cracked the seal. The ledger was there, a thin book filled with neat, damning columns of numbers and names. But there was something else. Folded beneath it, another document. It was a contract, a side agreement between Trevor Huxley and Antonio Ragusa. My eyes scanned the legalese until they landed on a single, horrifying clause. In the event of a legal or financial default by Huxley Dynamics, all personal assets of Trevor Huxley's betrothed, Lena Carr, including but not limited to her person, would be transferred to the Ragusa Covenant as collateral, an insurance policy. A wave of cold, clarifying rage washed over me, so intense it burned away the last of my fear. They hadn't just tried to humiliate me or trap me, they had signed a piece of paper that turned me into a thing, a commodity to be traded if their dirty deal went bad. The elevator doors opened onto the riverbank. The rain was coming down in hard, silver sheets. A powerful jet ski was tethered to a small dock, bobbing in the churning water, just as Cade had promised. Dante grabbed my hand, pulling me out into the downpour. We scrambled onto the jet ski, Hila right behind us. Dante gunned the engine, and we shot away from the shore, a silver streak against the black water. The glittering museum, with its flashing lights and screaming alarms, shrank behind us. The cold rain and river spray lashed my face, but I barely felt it. I clutched the ledger and the contract to my chest, the paper a testament to their depravity. I was shaking, not from the cold, but from a fury so pure it felt like a religious awakening. They were going to trade me like property, and I was going to make them pay for it, all of them. The jet ski cut through the black, churning water of the harbor, leaving the chaos of the Aurora Museum a glittering, frantic memory behind us. The rain and spray were relentless, plastering my hair to my face and soaking me to the bone. I was numb with cold, but a fire of pure, undiluted rage burned in my core, keeping the shivers at bay. I held the cylinder containing the ledger and my own death warrant against my chest, a talisman of their betrayal. Dante navigated us through the darkness with an expert's calm, finally guiding the craft into a darkened, covered boat slip. We were at the foot of a hulking brick structure, a relic from another era. Old firehouse. No, 17. The doors were shut, the windows dark. It looked abandoned, forgotten. But as Dante killed the engine and the sudden silence of the harbor rushed in, I knew this was another of his fortresses, a ghost building in a city of ghosts. Inside, the air was dry and smelled of old wood, brick, and wood smoke. A massive cast-iron stove stood in the center of the main bay where fire trucks once idled, a low fire already crackling within it, casting dancing shadows across the cavernous space. Our damp coats were hung on old brass hooks, and the steady drumming of the rain on the tin roof became a soothing, rhythmic counterpoint to the frantic beating of my own heart. Isla was already there, speaking quietly into a satellite phone in a corner, her presence a calm anchor in the storm. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. It wasn't just the cold anymore. It was the adrenaline leaching out of me, leaving an exhausted, vibrating tremor in its wake. "You're hurt." Dante's voice was low. I looked down. A thin, angry red line ran across the back of my hand, beaded with blood, a cut from the sharp edge of the glass swordfish during our frantic escape. I hadn't even felt it. Before I could dismiss it, he had retrieved a small metal first aid kit from a locker. He gestured for me to sit on a worn leather sofa near the fire. I obeyed, watching as he knelt before me. He didn't say a word, just opened the kit and began to clean the cut with a practiced, gentle efficiency. His movements were slow, deliberate. The touch of his fingers against my skin was surprisingly soft, a stark contrast to the violence I knew he was capable of. He wasn't looking at me as a problem to be solved or an asset to be managed. His dark eyes were focused entirely on the task, on mending this small, insignificant injury. In his careful attention, there was a tenderness that breached my defenses more effectively than any weapon could have. I let him work, my trembling slowly subsiding under his steady care. It was the most profound act of trust I had offered anyone in a very long time. He finished with a small, neat bandage. His fingers lingered for a moment on my hand before he leaned back, breaking the spell. "I never understood the appeal of a ring," he said quietly, his gaze shifting to the fire. A circle of metal to signify a contract, a business deal with flowers. The words were a direct echo of my mother's warning, of the truth I had tried so desperately to ignore with Trevor. "He said it was a promise," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. "A promise isn't something you wear for everyone else to see," Dante countered, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in the warm air. "It's something you keep when no one is looking." He finally looked at me, his eyes holding an unexpected depth. "That's the only kind that matters." The fire popped and hissed, filling the silence between us. The warmth was starting to seep into my bones, a welcome contrast to the cold fury that still simmered within me. He had seen the real contract, the one that made me collateral. He understood the stakes on a level no one else could. He used to tell me I was beautiful. I found myself saying, the confession a surprise even to me, when I was wearing the clothes he bought, at the parties he took me to, but it never felt real. It felt like I was an object he had polished for display. "And when did you feel beautiful?" Dante asked, his voice soft, genuinely curious. I thought for a moment, not of ballrooms or designer dresses, but of the hum of machinery and the satisfying click of a problem solved. "There was a motor," I said, a faint smile touching my lips for the first time that night. At the old textile mill, a pre-war synchronous motor that no one could get running. The schematics were lost decades ago. I spent 2 nights straight taking it apart piece by piece. My hands were black with grease. I was exhausted, and then I found it. A single hairline crack in a copper winding. I bypassed it, recalibrated the rotor, and threw the switch. I could still feel the memory, the deep, satisfying thrum as the massive machine shuddered to life. When I heard that sound, when I saw it turn, that's when I felt beautiful. Dante's answering smile was slow, and it transformed his face. Chasing the shadows from his eyes, "That's because you are most beautiful," he said, his voice laced with an arresting sincerity. "When you are in control." He stood up and held out his hand. It wasn't a command, but a quiet invitation. There was no music, only the crackle of the fire and the rhythm of the rain. I placed my bandaged hand in his, and he drew me to my feet. We began to move, a slow, unchoreographed dance in the flickering firelight. It wasn't about steps or form, it was about the connection. His hand was firm on my back, a steady anchor. My other hand rested on his shoulder, and I could feel the strength there, coiled and waiting. We swayed to the beat of our own hearts, a silent conversation passing between us in the space of a shared breath. The world outside this firehouse, with its assassins and liars, ceased to exist. There was only the warmth of the fire, the sound of the rain, and the solid, reassuring presence of the man holding me. He stopped moving, but he didn't let me go. He simply held me there, his dark eyes searching my face, asking a question I already knew the answer to. I saw my own reflection in their depths, not a victim, not a broken bride, but a woman who had survived. A woman he saw as his equal. Slowly, he lowered his head. The first touch of his lips was tentative, a soft exploration, asking for permission I had already given with my eyes, I responded, rising on my toes, my hand moving from his shoulder to the nape of his neck, my fingers tangling in his short, dark hair. The kiss deepened, the initial hesitation melting away into a wave of heat that had nothing to do with the fire. It was a kiss of shared solitude, of mutual respect, of a ferocious, unspoken understanding. His hand slid from my back to gently cup my jaw, his thumb stroking the line of my collarbone, a touch that sent a shiver through me that was all warmth, no cold. I leaned into him, letting him guide me back until my shoulders met the warm, rough brick of the wall beside the fireplace. The solidness of it at my back was grounding. His body shielded me from the room, creating an intimate world just for us. This wasn't a frantic, desperate act. It was deliberate. It was a release. Every wall I had built around my heart, every defense I had constructed to survive, crumbled into dust. I was giving him my trust, completely and without reservation. His breath was warm against my skin, our breathing, mingling, falling into the same rhythm. He whispered my name, a low, rough sound that was both a question and a statement. Lena. I'm here, I breathed back, the words a promise. We pulled apart slowly, reluctantly, a shared sigh of mingled relief and longing passing between us. Our foreheads rested against each other, our eyes closed. It wasn't an ending, but a pause, a mutual decision to honor the delicate, powerful new thing that was taking root between us in the ruins of my old life. The shrill ring of the satellite phone shattered the moment. We sprang apart, Isla answered, her face grim. Yes, I see. How long she listened, her jaw tightening. Understood. She hung up and looked at us, her calm demeanor gone, replaced by a stark urgency. That was my source inside the BSCD. The city commissioner just replaced the director. The new chief is a man named Wallace. He's been on the Ragusa payroll for years. She took a breath. Our window of safety is closing. They'll start using official channels to hunt for us. Warrants, citywide alerts. They're going to try and bury us under the full weight of the law. Dante's focus was immediate, absolute. The warmth in his eyes was replaced by cold, hard steel. He turned to me, his hand finding mine, his grip tight and reassuring. This changes the timeline, he said, his voice low and intense. We can't wait. We release the ledger tonight, now. If we don't, they will rewrite history by morning, and we will be the villains in it forever. I felt the steel enter my own spine. I thought of the contract, of the men who had deemed me a piece of property. They had tried to silence my voice, to erase my identity. Not anymore. I squeezed his hand back, my decision absolute. Let me do it, I said, my voice ringing with a clarity that surprised even me. They used my name, my story, to start this. Let me be the one to finish it. Dante looked at me, a long, searching gaze. He saw the fire in my eyes, the unshakable resolve. He saw a partner. He nodded once, a sharp, final agreement. We turned from the fire, the warmth of our brief peace still clinging to us like the scent of wood smoke in my hair. The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. But now, we would face it together, our eyes bright with the light of two people who had just chosen each other in the dark. The firehouse was no longer a sanctuary. It was a launch pad. Cade had a dark, powerful sedan waiting in the main bay, its engine already humming a low, impatient tune. The plan was simple, direct, and incredibly dangerous. We had to get the original ledger to Baybridge Independent Video News, the one local station not in the pocket of either the Huxleys or the Ragusas. Isla had already briefed their night editor, a grizzled veteran of city politics named Sal, who had agreed to see us. No questions asked, if we could make it through the door. I slid into the passenger seat, the cylinder containing the ledger and the contract clutched in my hands. It was the only weapon I had. Dante took the wheel, his presence filling the small space with a calm, focused intensity. Isla and Cade remained at the firehouse, our eyes and ears, the ghosts in the machine. "Comms check," Cade's voice crackled in my earpiece. "I'm with you." "Stay sharp," Dante said, his eyes on the rain-slicked street as he pulled out of the alley. "They know we have to surface sometime. They'll be hunting." He was right. We made it less than 10 blocks before the trap was sprung. The Silica Bridge was the fastest route to BIVN's downtown studio. As we approached the upward slope, a heavy-duty pickup truck, its headlights off, pulled out from a side street, blocking all lanes, a roadblock. Dante didn't slow down. "Hold on," was all he said. He wrenched the wheel to the right, the sedan's tires screaming in protest as he swerved onto the wide pedestrian walkway that ran alongside the bridge's suspension cables. The car bucked, metal scraping against the guardrail, sending a shower of sparks into the night. "Cade, now!" Dante snapped. "Deploying party favors," Cade's voice replied, unnervingly cheerful. From the darkness above, a small drone dropped like a hawk. It released a dense cloud of thick, white smoke directly in front of the pickup truck, shot through with a glittering, reflective chaff that would blind any electronic surveillance. Men were spilling out of the truck, but they were momentarily lost in the disorienting fog. We shot past them, back onto the main road, the city lights spreading out before us. In that moment of adrenaline-fueled triumph, my phone, which I'd thought was off, lit up on the dashboard. Trevor's name flashed on the screen. On pure, stupid instinct, I answered it. "Lena, thank God." His voice was a frantic, pleading wreck. "Listen to me. It's not what you think. The Ragusas, they forced my hand. Just come back. We can fix this. I'll delete everything. We'll go away. I swear." I looked at the cylinder in my lap. I thought of the clause that made me his property to be traded. A cold, hard clarity washed over me. He wasn't sorry. He was just sorry he'd been caught. I ended the call without a word and threw the phone onto the back seat. The last embers of any feeling I had for him, even pity, were extinguished. All that was left was resolve. "He just gave us something." Isla's voice cut in, sharp and analytical. "He's tracking your phone. Cade, can you use that?" "Already on it," Cade said. "I'm sending his trackers on a little ghost ride to the other side of town. But another problem just popped up. Black sedan, 4 o'clock. Been on us since we cleared the bridge." I glanced in the side mirror and saw it, a featureless car that clung to us like a shadow, its headlights boring into us. "License plate reads 26QUINCE, I read out. "Got it," Isla said after a beat. "It's registered to a shell corp, the United Municipal Inspection Committee. It's one of Ragusa's fronts for bribing city officials. They're not police. They're his private army." Dante's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "They won't risk a direct confrontation in the open. They'll try to box us in." He made a sharp, unexpected left turn, plunging us off the main thoroughfare and into the chaotic, neon-drenched labyrinth of the Dockline night market. The world exploded into a sensory assault. The sedan fishtailed on the wet cobblestones, narrowly missing a stall hung with gleaming, roasted ducks. People scattered, shouting in a dozen languages. The air was thick with the smells of sizzling meat, fish, and rain. Awnings and strings of paper lanterns flew past the windows as Dante navigated the impossibly narrow street. The Ragusa sedan was right behind us, more reckless, crashing through stalls and sending produce flying. I held onto the ledger, my body pressed into the seat, my world reduced to the flashing lights and the steady, controlled movements of the man beside me. We burst out of the market and onto a wide, deserted industrial road lined with old warehouses. And then I saw them. 2 BSCD cruisers, lights flashing, blocking the road ahead, but these were the new BSCD, Ragusa's BSCD. The black sedan behind us sped up, boxing us in. We were caught. Dante brought our car to a smooth, controlled stop. For a moment, there was a terrible, ringing silence. "They want the ledger," I whispered. "They won't get it," Dante said, his voice a blade of ice. He turned to me, his dark eyes intense, searching. "Can you run?" I thought of the jumpsuit I'd worn. I thought of the wrench in my pocket. I nodded once. "Yes." "Good." He unbuckled his seatbelt. "When I get out, they'll all be watching me. Kate is going to open the sunroof. I'm going to give you a copy. You take it and you run. Don't look back. Don't stop for anything. Hila will guide you." "A copy. What about you?" "I'll be the distraction," he said simply. He raised his hands, empty, and slowly opened his door, stepping out into the flashing red and blue lights, all weapons, all attention, swiveled to him. As he moved into the open, a small panel in the roof above my head slid back, in the same motion. Dante's hand dipped into his jacket and then swung up, tossing a small, dark object through the opening. A USB drive. I snatched it out of the air, my fingers closing around the cool metal. "Go! Lena now!" Cade's voice screamed in my ear. I didn't hesitate. I threw my door open and ran. I plunged into the darkness between two warehouses, the sound of shouting erupting behind me. I didn't look back. I just ran, my feet pounding the pavement, the USB clutched in my fist. "First left, there's an unlocked loading bay door," Isla's voice directed, calm and steady in my ear, a lifeline in the chaos. I found the door and slipped inside, the heavy metal slamming shut behind me. I was in a maze of stacked crates and silent machinery. The shouts and sirens were muffled, distant. Footsteps echoed behind me. They were inside. "They're splitting up," Cade warned. "3 of them coming down the main corridor." I ducked behind a mountain of wooden pallets, my breath catching in my throat. My eyes darted around, my old technician's instincts taking over. I saw a large freight elevator, its doors open, and next to it, a gray metal panel. The main electrical control for the lift, an idea, born of desperation and years of experience, sparked in my mind. "Isla, I have an idea," I whispered. "Keep them coming." I darted from my hiding place, making just enough noise to draw them. I heard their footsteps quicken. I reached the elevator and scrambled inside, pressing myself into the darkest corner. The 3 officers, flashlights sweeping, entered the elevator bay. "She's in here somewhere," one of them yelled. They stepped inside, their beams cutting through the darkness, and in that moment, I moved. I lunged out of the elevator, my hand slamming against the control panel on the wall. I ripped the cover off, my fingers finding the main power relay. With the edge of a small metal card from my wallet, I shorted the circuit, resetting the system. The lights in the elevator car flickered and died. The heavy doors slid shut with a pneumatic hiss and a final, definitive thud. The emergency brake engaged with a loud groan. I could hear them shouting, pounding on the inside of the door. They were trapped. I didn't wait to celebrate. I ran. Meanwhile, back on the warehouse floor, Dante faced Matteo Ragusa, who had emerged from the black sedan. "The girl is gone," Viscari, Matteo spat, his men fanning out around them. "Give me the ledger." "You think this is about a book," Dante said, circling him slowly. "You operate by the law of the strong. You take what you want because you can... But that law has a weakness. It breaks against the law of the facts. And the fact is, you've already lost." "Words," Matteo sneered. "Actions," Dante replied, and moved. He was a blur, closing the distance between them. It wasn't a brawl. It was a single, brutal act of physics. He sidestepped Matteo's clumsy punch, seized his arm, and used his momentum against him in a perfect shoulder throw. Matteo hit the concrete floor with a grunt that knocked the air from his lungs. Dante stood over him, not with a weapon, but with an utter, dismissive finality. I burst out of the back of the warehouse complex and onto the street right in front of the BIVN building, its logo a welcome beacon in the night, the finish line. But my relief was short-lived. A man in a tailored suit stepped out of the shadows, blocking my path to the door. He was flanked by two more of the corrupt BSCD officers. He had an arrogant, self-satisfied smile on his face. "Lena Carr," he said, "I'm Chief Wallace, and you're under arrest." He produced a folded document from his jacket. "I have a warrant here for your apprehension, for obstruction of justice and conspiracy." He held it out for me to see. My eyes scanned the official-looking paper, and then I saw it. A small, stupid, beautiful mistake. In the formal declaration, the word warrant was misspelled. They had typed warrant. A wild, audacious idea seized me. My hand went to my back pocket and pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen, opening my social media app, and hit the Go Live button. "Chief Wallace," I said, my voice loud and clear. The camera on my phone pointed directly at the document in his hand, to the thousands of people now watching in Bay Bridge. "I'd like you to see this official arrest warrant." I zoomed in on the typo. It seems the new chief of the BSCD is in such a hurry to silence a witness to his friend's corruption that he couldn't even be bothered to use a spell checker. Wallace's face turned from smug to purple with rage. "Turn that off," he snarled, reaching for the phone. But it was too late. The glass doors of BIVN slid open behind me. Sal, the editor, a man who looked like he'd been sleeping in his suit for a week, stood there with a cameraman. The camera's red light was on. We were on the air. Isla appeared beside me, a tablet in her hand, ready to feed the data from the USB to their control room. "The city is watching, Chief," Isla said, her voice like chipped ice. Just then, the camera panned to the side as Dante walked out of the darkness of the street, calm and untouched, his suit immaculate. He stopped beside me, his presence a solid wall of support. He looked at the stammering, enraged police chief, then at the camera. "Let her speak," he said. The glare of the television studio lights was a physical thing, hot and blinding. But I didn't flinch. The chaotic energy of the press, the shouting questions from Chief Wallace, the flashing lights, it all faded into a low hum. My world had narrowed to the small red light on the main camera and the steady, grounding presence of Dante beside me. This was my stage now. I had seized the broadcast. I held up the USB drive. "This contains the unedited financial ledger of the Sunrise Pledge Foundation," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. Sal, the editor, had a graphic of the drive on the main screen, giving my words a visual anchor. "I am not going to make accusations or allegations. I'm simply going to present the facts and invite the public and the relevant authorities to draw their own conclusions." Isla, a true professional, was already feeding the data to the BIVN control room. A simplified, easy-to-read version of the money trail appeared on screen beside my face, a clear, damning line connecting a known Ragusa holding company through the Lucent Harbor LLC Shell Corporation, directly to the Sunrise Pledge. "This isn't charity," I stated calmly. "This is a money laundering operation, using the sick and the needy as a cover to wash dirty money so it can be used to illegally prop up the Huxley Dynamics IPO." As if summoned by the devil, Trevor's voice, tinny and distorted, came through the studio speakers. They had patched in a call. "Lena, stop this," he pleaded, his voice cracking with a performance of desperation. "Can't you all see she's not herself? Dante Viscari has brainwashed her. He's manipulating this entire situation for his own ends, Lena. Baby, please, just come home. We can sort this out." The narrative shift was pathetic, but it was also dangerous. He was trying to paint me as a puppet, a hysterical woman under the control of a mobster. Before I could even respond, Dante took a half-step forward, not into my spotlight, but into the camera's periphery. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at Sal. He gave a subtle nod. "Mr. Huxley," Sal's grizzled voice interjected, "while you're on the line, perhaps you can explain this." The screen split. On one side was my face. On the other, new footage appeared. It was crystal-clear security footage from the Meridian Crown on my wedding night. It showed Trevor in the hotel's tech room, personally directing the video editor. "Make her look desperate." His voice, crisp and clear, echoed through the studio. "I need her broken. She has to sign." A collective gasp went through the live studio audience. The checkmate. Trevor fell silent on the other end of the line, the sound of his ragged breathing the only evidence he was still there, before the line went dead. And the hits kept coming. A new window appeared on the screen, a live video call, a woman in her 50s, her face kind but etched with worry, looked out at us. "My name is Maria Flores," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "My husband and I run a small catering business. We were offered a grant from the Sunrise Pledge to expand, to hire more people from our community. It was a dream come true." She took a shaky breath. "But the condition was that we had to turn over our entire client database, including their private payment information, to a marketing partner. That partner was Huxley Dynamics. When we refused, our grant was revoked." Suddenly, this wasn't just my story. It was the story of every small person the Huxleys had stepped on to build their fraudulent empire. The final blow came not from us, but from within the system itself. Another call was patched through, this one from a stern, official-looking man. "This is Deputy Chief Miller of the BSCD Internal Affairs Division," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "In light of the evidence presented on this broadcast, Director Wallace is being suspended pending a full investigation into his conduct and associations. The BSCD is officially opening an inquiry into the financial activities of the Sunrise Pledge and Huxley Dynamics." We had won. We had taken their narrative and shattered it with the undeniable weight of the truth. The high lasted less than an hour. We were in a back office at BIVN, the adrenaline starting to fade, when Cade's voice came through my earpiece, stripped of its usual playful tone. "Dante, we have a problem. A big one." Dante was instantly alert. "What is it?" "Isla, she left 15 minutes ago to meet with one of the pro bono lawyers we're using. She never arrived. Her car was found empty. Engine running on a side street. Her comm is dead." Cade paused, and the silence was terrifying. "I just got a message. Untraceable text. It's a picture of Isla. She's unharmed, but she's a hostage. And a message. The book for the strategist. You have 1 hour." The blood drained from my face. They had taken Isla. Ragusa didn't care about public opinion or legal inquiries. He played a different game, with different rules and different stakes. Dante's face was a mask of cold fury. He was already moving toward the door. "I'm going." "No," the word came out of me, sharp and absolute, stopping him in his tracks. He turned, his eyes blazing. "Lena, this is not a debate." "Yes, it is," I shot back, stepping in front of him, blocking his path. I saw the raw, protective instinct warring with his strategic mind. I knew he would trade himself for her in a heartbeat, and that's exactly what Ragusa was counting on. They used me as bait to start this whole thing. They treated me like a pawn, so let me be the one to set the final trap. This is my fight too. Dante, you made it my fight when you stood up for me. Don't take it away from me now." He stared at me, his jaw tight. He saw the logic, the cold, hard steel in my eyes that mirrored his own. He was a man who respected strength, and for the first time, he saw mine as equal to his. He finally gave a single, reluctant nod. The next 20 minutes were a blur of cold, calculated preparation. We couldn't give them the original ledger. We couldn't give them Dante. So we built a wall of mirrors. Cade made 7 identical copies of the USB drive. Dante made a series of encrypted calls. Within the hour, all 7 copies were in the hands of 7 of the most aggressive, high-profile civil rights attorneys in the tri-state area. Cade set up the final piece of the trap, a dead man's switch, a website with a single, ominous countdown timer set for 90 minutes. It's linked to all 7 law firms, so, Cade explained, his fingers flying across his keyboard, if Dante, Lena, or Isla are not confirmed safe and free by the time it hits 0, the full, unredacted ledger, along with Dante's complete file on the Ragusa Covenant, is automatically released to every major news outlet on the planet. I've sent the link to Matteo Ragusa's personal phone. He'll understand the terms. The meeting point was Pier 41, a desolate wasteland of shipping containers and rusting cranes. I pulled a bright yellow rain slicker over my clothes. If I was the bait, I would be visible. I would be a clear, defiant target in the gloom. When we arrived, the pier was shrouded in a damp, chilling fog. Matteo Ragusa was waiting in the open space between two towering stacks of containers. Two of his men held Isla between them. She was pale but composed, her chin held high. "The book for the strategist," Matteo called out, his voice echoing in the misty air. The terms were clear. Vescari. Before Dante could answer, another car screeched to a halt at the edge of the pier. "Trevor." He stumbled out, his hair wild, his face a mess of desperation. He ran toward me. "Lena, I came to help. I can talk to them. I can fix this." I looked at him, not with hatred, but with a profound, weary pity. He was a child who had wandered onto a battlefield, still believing he was in charge. "You can't fix this, Trevor," I said, my voice flat. "You were never the one holding the broken pieces." Matteo Ragusa looked at Trevor with utter contempt. "Get him out of my sight!" One of his men grabbed Trevor, shoving him aside like a piece of garbage. The truth finally seemed to dawn on Trevor's face. He was just another pawn, and an insignificant one at that. "The USB, Vescari," Matteo repeated, impatient. "The original. My experts will know if it's a copy." I stepped forward, past Dante. All eyes fell on me. "He's not carrying it," I said, my voice ringing out, clear and steady. "I am." I reached into my pocket. Matteo's men tensed, but I didn't pull out a USB drive. I pulled out my father's small, worn crescent wrench. I held it up in the dim light. "You and Trevor. You think in terms of assets," I said, my voice filled with a cold rage I didn't know I possessed. "Of shares and contracts and things you can trade. You wanted to trade me. So I brought you my leverage." I tossed the wrench from hand to hand. "This is a tool. It takes things apart. It puts them back together. It's the one thing in my life that has never lied. That is my original. And it's all you're getting." Matteo stared at me, his face a mask of confusion and fury. He had no category for this, no way to process this act of symbolic defiance. And then Cade made his move. Every floodlight on Pier 41 went out at once, plunging us into near total darkness. In the same instant, a massive projector, hidden somewhere in the gantries above, flickered to life. Projected onto the side of a huge, rust-streaked shipping container were giant, glowing red numbers 012959. The countdown had begun. 012958. Cade's voice, digitally amplified, boomed through the pier. "Matteo, the choice is yours. Release her, and the clock stops. Don't, and your entire family's financial infrastructure becomes public record in 89 minutes. The clock is ticking." Matteo Ragusa was trapped. His world was built on secrecy, on the shadows. We had just threatened him with total, absolute daylight. He stared at the countdown, then at Isla, then at us, for a long, tense moment. No one moved. 012945. "Let her go!" Matteo finally snarled through clenched teeth. His men shoved Isla forward, and she stumbled into Dante's waiting arms. It was over. We had won. Trevor, seeing it all fall apart, let out a strangled cry of despair and turned to run. But in his panic, his expensive leather shoes slipped on a patch of slick, greasy oil on the pavement. He went down hard, his body skidding toward the edge of the pier and the dark, cold water below. Before anyone could react, Dante moved. He lunged forward, not in anger, but with a swift, efficient grace. He caught Trevor's wrist just as he was about to slide over the edge. He held him there, dangling for a moment, the pathetic, broken architect of my misery. Then, with a grunt of effort, Dante hauled him back onto the solid ground. Trevor lay on the pier, gasping and shivering. Dante stood over him, not with triumph, but with a look of profound disgust. "You're not worth dying like this," Dante said, his voice quiet, but carrying the weight of a final judgment. The next morning, the Bay Bridge Civil Courthouse felt like a parallel universe to the Meridian Crown Ballroom, where the hotel had been a gilded cage of soft light and suffocating lilies. The courthouse was a hall of hard surfaces and unfiltered morning sun. Marble floors, oak benches, the air smelling of old paper and the promise of consequences. This was my real wedding day. I thought, a ceremony of severance. I walked down the central aisle of Chamber 12, not in a silk gown, but in a clean, dark blue jumpsuit. Pinned to my chest, over my heart, was my father's small crescent wrench, its worn steel a quiet declaration of who I was. Dante was with me, a silent, formidable presence a few steps behind. He didn't hold my hand or guide me. He was there as a witness, not a principal, affording me the dignity of standing on my own 2 feet in the arena they had built for me. The entire city was buzzing. The courtroom was packed with reporters, their faces a mixture of predatory hunger and grudging respect. The hearing for my restraining order was a formality, but it was a stage, and the Huxley's lawyer played his part with practiced melodrama. "Your Honor, this is a clear case of media manipulation," he argued, gesturing toward me as if I were a particularly venomous snake. "Miss Carr has cynically exploited the press, using our client's good name to concoct a sensationalist narrative, all under the influence of the Vescari organization, in a clear attempt to extort a massive settlement." When it was my turn to speak, I didn't address him. I addressed the judge, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't perform. I simply recited the facts, a litany of truth that was more damning than any emotional appeal. At 10:14 p.m. 2 nights ago, my wedding was interrupted by a video montage, broadcast by the Huxley family, designed to defame my character. At 10:22 p.m., a second video proved that my fiancé, Trevor Huxley, had commissioned the first video with the express purpose of coercing me into signing a fraudulent legal document. At 11:08 p.m., I was a passenger in a vehicle pursued by men masquerading as officers of the Bay Bridge Special Crimes Directorate. At 10:37 p.m. last night, I was held at the scene of a crime by the new, illegitimate BSCD chief, who attempted to arrest me with a forged warrant. I spoke without passion, laying out the timeline brick by brick, building a case so solid and factual it was irrefutable. The Huxley lawyer tried to object, but the judge waved him into silence, her eyes fixed on me. The final nail in their coffin was hammered in by a man who was the antithesis of the Huxleys' corrupt world, Deputy Chief Miller of BSCD Internal Affairs. He was sworn in and presented a single piece of evidence to the court, a printout of an internal, encrypted directive sent out the night of the wedding, after I had fled. "This order, Your Honor, was issued by then Deputy Chief Wallace," Miller said, his voice a flat monotone. It offered a significant commendation and bonus to any officer who could resolve the runaway bride situation. That is a direct quote. Resolve. A dead, profound silence fell over the courtroom. The word hung in the air, thick with menace. Resolve. It wasn't an order to find a missing person. It was an order to neutralize a threat. The judge stared at the document for a long moment, her expression hardening into granite. She didn't waste any more time. "The temporary restraining order against defamation is granted and made permanent," she declared, her voice ringing with judicial finality. "Furthermore, this court orders an immediate and total freeze on all assets and accounts associated with the Sunrise Pledge Foundation, pending a full forensic audit. And let the record show," she added, looking directly at the city prosecutor, "that this court has seen sufficient evidence to include the Ragusa Covenant as a person of interest in the ongoing criminal investigation." It was a total, unequivocal victory. Walking out of the courthouse and into the bright, clear morning was like stepping into a different world. The anger and tension of the past 2 days washed away, replaced by something I hadn't felt in years, a sense of belonging. The wide plaza in front of the courthouse was filled with people, not reporters, but men and women in work boots and tool belts, in electricians' coveralls and plumbers' jackets, the technicians of Bay Bridge. They held up handmade signs. One reads, "Some things can't be bought. Stand with Lena." Another, simpler one, made a lump form in my throat. Broken system. Dismantle and reassemble properly. They saw the wrench on my chest, and they cheered. They weren't cheering for a victim or a celebrity. They were cheering for one of their own. And then, a final, pathetic act in this tragic play, a path cleared, and Trevor stepped through the crowd, his face a mess of practiced remorse. A news camera following his every move. He stopped in front of me, his eyes pleading. He actually got down on one knee. "Lena," he said, his voice loud enough for every microphone to catch. "I was wrong. I was a fool. I was manipulated by my family, by our world. But I love you. Please, give me a chance to fix this. Marry me." The audacity was breathtaking. He was trying to turn his public disgrace into a redemption story, with me as his forgiving prize. The crowd murmured, unsure how to react. This was the language they understood: love, forgiveness, a second chance. Before I could even process the insult, Dante stepped forward. He placed himself not in front of me, but beside me, a barrier and a statement. He wasn't addressing me. He was addressing the world. "No one," he said, his voice low but carrying an immense weight that silenced the entire plaza, "has the right to turn an apology into a life sentence for this woman." He looked from Trevor to the cameras, his gaze like black ice. "If anyone tries to force her to choose, they will have to deal with me on a level playing field." His words hit the crowd like a shockwave, a declaration of protection so fierce and absolute it was almost a threat. The phrase went viral before he had even finished speaking. But then he did something extraordinary. He took a half step back, ceding the stage, his eyes finding mine, telling me without words that the choice and the power was entirely my own. I looked down at Trevor, still kneeling at my feet, the architect of my near destruction, now begging to be my savior. I thought of the lies, the manipulation, the contract that made me property. I thought of the girl with grease on her hands who believed in fixing broken things. And I gave my answer. No. The single word was quiet, but it landed with the force of a guillotine. It was the end, the final, clean cut. Trevor's face crumpled. The illusion was shattered, his last play a miserable failure. He was still kneeling there, a broken man in a broken narrative, when two plainclothes officers from Miller's real BSCD team stepped forward and gently helped him to his feet. "Trevor Huxley," one of them said quietly, "you're under arrest for obstruction of a federal financial investigation." They cuffed his hands behind his back, a quiet, almost anticlimactic end to his reign. As they led him away, the cameras swiveled from his retreating form to Dante. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't gloating, he just watched Trevor go, and then he let out a long, slow breath, a quiet exhalation of a war finally won, another battle, I knew, was already on the horizon. In front of the entire city, in front of all the cameras, I reached out and took Dante's hand, his fingers closed around mine, a firm, reassuring warmth. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a romantic declaration for the evening news. It was a statement of fact, a declaration of my own freedom. I was free to choose my allies, free to choose my own path. And I had chosen to stand with him. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, his expression darkening as he read the screen. He held it so I could see. A text from an unknown number, from Mateo. The message was 5 words long. "Tonight, Bay Bridge loses power." A new line of text appeared a second later. "We don't need money when we have the dark." The victory at the courthouse was a fleeting sunrise. Mateo's message was the storm rolling in to reclaim the sky, the city's power grid, the complex, fragile network that I understood better than anyone, was now a weapon aimed at its own heart. Ragusa's plan, the Black Tide, was brutally simple if he couldn't control the city's wealth. He would erase it. A targeted, massive power surge to the Ironworks district's main data hubs would fry the servers, corrupt the digital records, and turn the evidence we had fought for into meaningless electronic ghosts. Before panic could set in, Dante was in motion. His Vescari infrastructure preservation team, a name that sounded corporate but was, in reality, a crew of loyal, highly skilled engineers and ex-military technicians, was mobilized with a single, coded message. But they were specialists in structural integrity, not the intricate web of the city's electrical grid. "They can secure the perimeter, but they can't fix the core problem," Dante said, his voice a low, urgent hum as we raced back to the firehouse. "Ragusa's men will be creating a cascading failure. We need people who can read the system in the dark." He looked at me. He wasn't giving an order, and he was asking for my help, for my world. I pulled out my phone and sent a single message to a group chat of the best independent technicians in Bay Bridge, the ones who had stood for me outside the courthouse. "Code Black, North Point Substation. They're trying to break the city's heart. I'm going in. Who's with me?" The replies came in seconds. "On my way. Got my kit. Let's get the lights back on." The North Point substation was a metal fortress on a hill overlooking the ironworks, a tangled heart of transformers and circuit breakers humming with lethal power. We arrived just as the first wave of the attack hit. The lights across the district flickered violently, then died, plunging a third of the city into an unnatural, inky blackness. The rain was coming down in a torrential downpour, turning the substation into a treacherous landscape of slick metal and live wires. My people were there, a small, determined army in yellow rain slickers, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. They met Dante's disciplined team not with suspicion, but with a shared sense of purpose. There was no time for introductions, only for the work. "The primary transformer is overheating." One of my colleagues, a grizzled genius named Art, shouted over the roar of the rain and the groaning of the grid. "They've bypassed the fail-safes. It's going to blow and take the whole quadrant with it." I saw the path, a manual override on the roof, accessible only by a maintenance ladder. It was insane, a climb into the teeth of the storm. "I can bypass it," I yelled. "I can create a bridge to reroute the load." Dante's hand closed on my arm, his grip like steel. "Lena, no, it's too dangerous." "It's the only way," I said, meeting his gaze. My eyes filled with a certainty he couldn't argue with. This was my language, my machine. "You protected me in your world. Let me protect us in mine." I left him at the base of the ladder and began to climb, the cold, wet rungs biting into my hands. The wind tried to tear me from my perch. Rain blinded me. Below, Dante stood like a statue, his eyes following my every move, a silent guardian in the storm. I reached the platform, a metal grate slick with rain, and clipped my safety line. The transformer beside me was screaming, a high-pitched wail of a machine being pushed past its limits. I opened the control panel, my hands moving with a life of their own, my mind a calm sea of schematics and solutions. I was so focused, I didn't hear him approach until he was standing on the opposite side of the transformer. Matteo Ragusa. He was soaked to the skin, his fancy suit ruined, his face a mask of feral desperation. He wasn't holding a weapon, he didn't need one. We were surrounded by enough electricity to vaporize a man. "Impressive," he shouted over the storm. "The little mechanic." Below, Dante saw him and started up the ladder. Matteo just smiled. "Stay down there. Vescari or your girlfriend gets a lesson in electrocution." Dante froze on the ladder, his face a mask of cold fury. "It's a simple choice." Matteo yelled at him. "A trade. Tell your hacker to pull the files. Wipe the ledger from every server. In return, I call my men off. I let the city have its lights back." He was offering a truce, but it was a life sentence. If we let him win, the truth would be buried forever. Before Dante could answer, I turned from my work. "You don't get it! Matteo!" I shouted, my voice cutting through the wind. You think this is about a switch you can flip, but you can't control the one switch that matters: trust. I pulled my phone from my pocket. It was shielded in a waterproof case. My thumb hovered over the screen. You think you can operate in the dark, I yelled, my words a declaration of war. But the thing about the truth is, it makes its own light. I pressed the screen. It's done. Cade, release everything. To everyone. Mateo's face contorted in disbelief. He had lost. He knew it in that instant. And then, as if the city itself was rendering its verdict, the lights of Bay Bridge began to come back on. Not all at once, but in a rolling wave of gold and white that pushed back the darkness, block by block. A roar went up from the residential districts, the sound of a city breathing again. The transformer beside me, its load rerouted by my team on the ground, settled from a scream into a steady, powerful hum. Mateo took a step back, his face slack with defeat. The game was over, the board was lost, and then the rooftop was flooded with the harsh, strobing lights of police cruisers. The real BSCD, led by Deputy Chief Miller, swarmed the platform. "Mateo Ragusa," Miller's voice boomed. "You are under arrest." This time, the warrant was spelled correctly. As they cuffed him, I learned that Trevor, facing an insurmountable mountain of evidence, had signed a full cooperation agreement in exchange for a reduced sentence. He had saved himself by selling out everyone else. Dante was beside me then, his hand finding mine in the pouring rain as we watched them lead Mateo away. We descended the ladder into the controlled, professional chaos of the cleanup. We didn't embrace, we didn't kiss, we just stood there, soaked and exhausted, and looked at each other. And we both started to laugh. It was a laugh of pure, unadulterated relief, the sound of two people who had just dismantled a giant, broken machine and put it back together the right way. Later, in the quiet, humming warmth of a small technical bay inside the substation, we finally talked. "So what now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Do I get a Vescari family crest tattooed on my arm?" Dante's expression was serious. "No," he said, taking both of my hands in his. "I'm not asking you to join my world, Lena. I'm asking you to build a new one with me." He took a breath. "I propose a partnership, a legitimate one. I want to hire Car Systems, your company, to be the exclusive, fully licensed infrastructure and maintenance provider for every Vescari-owned property in this city. Every contract public, every ledger transparent. We do it right, together." It was the most romantic thing I had ever heard. He wasn't offering me a cage, no matter how gilded. He was offering me a blueprint, a set of tools, and a foundation to build on. He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. Our hands were intertwined, his strong and steady, mine smudged with the honest dirt of the night's work. "When the lights go out," he whispered, his voice thick with an emotion he no longer had to hide, "I know I'll still have the light of your skill to guide me." Epilogue. 1 year later, the Sunrise Pledge was a memory, its assets seized and redistributed to the communities it had exploited. The fake FCIO was exposed, its members facing federal charges. The BSCD was undergoing a painful but necessary reformation under Chief Miller. And the first Wrench and Wing Scholarship, funded by the new legitimate profits of Car Systems, was awarded to a promising young woman from the Ironworks district. On the rooftop of the Meridian Crown Hotel, under a clear, starry sky, we had our wedding. There was no live stream, no press, no benefactors, just a handful of our closest friends, Isla, Cade, my crew from the Technicians Guild. I wore a simple, elegant white jumpsuit. Dante didn't give me a diamond ring. Instead, he slid a small, beautifully crafted silver wrench onto my finger. It fit perfectly. As the judge pronounced us partners for life, a helicopter sliced through the night sky, its searchlight a fleeting reminder of the shadows that still lurked in the city below. But we weren't running. We were staying. We had found our purpose whenever the systems of this city groaned and squealed with injustice. We would be there to take them apart and put them back together the right way. The shame of my old wedding became the switch that powered a new life, and this time, the man who stood up for her was the ally she had chosen. Thank you so much for listening to our story. I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from, so please drop a comment below to share your thoughts and connect with the community. Don't forget to subscribe to Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and show your support by hitting the hype button to help this story reach more listeners.